This is a video on word division rules. When do you use these? Well, it's really recommended to avoid word division whenever possible. If you're preparing a newsletter, a report, APA style, MLA style, whatever style, if you're doing business letters or you're doing memos, avoid word division if you can. If you can't, then you need to follow a few rules. The first being, always divide between syllables and only between syllables. And you can find your words, break them up into syllables, because many times they're not exactly as you think. You can go to dictionary.com. You can use the reference in your Word software program, or you may have a good old hard copy dictionary that you can look the word up. But you should first check to be sure the words are broken correctly into syllables. Once your word is broken into syllables, then you can go about applying the word division rules. And you can find the word division rules in your Gregg reference manual. As I have referenced here, I even have the number of most of the rules if you go to that little book. And you can get a Gregg reference manual in a number of places. Amazon.com, you can go to your school bookstore. Many of the other bookstores will have a reference manual. Currently, the edition is the 11th edition. I find I use the 10th just as well, and it's quite a bit cheaper. But the Gregg reference manual will have those rules. And you're going to get started with, once it's in syllables, is do not divide a one-syllable word. Examples: planned, thorough, straight, rhyme. If it doesn't have more than one syllable, it cannot be divided. Another point to keep in mind, if your word is 5 or fewer letters, you may not divide it. Actually, it's recommended in many cases 6 letters. It should not be divided. Examples here: power, city, locate. Power, 2 syllables but only 5 letters. City, 4 letters. Locate has 6, but lo-kate is not recommended. Do not set off a 1-letter syllable at the beginning or at the end of a word. Examples: ideal, media. And if you look at media, you would not be saving any space because the hyphen would take up for where the letter A would be. And ideal, if you see a paper and you're looking along, you see an I at the end of a line, and then you go to the deal on the next line, if it would be ideal. It's really hard for readability, so do not separate one syllable at the beginning or at the end of a line. And if you look 5 letters anyway, you would not want to divide that anyway. Do not divide a word unless you can leave at least 2 letters and a hyphen on the upper line, or 3 letters at the beginning of the next line. And sometimes you have to use your judgment on some of these. For example, intercept. It's much better to divide it inter and sept. Even though you have an IN, you would have IN, in, and then tercept on the next line. So I would recommend, if you can, intercept. In the case of repairing, it would be best to do repair hyphen ing on the next line rather than re and then pairing on the next line. In symphony, symphonie, rather than have those 2 letters, I would do sim and then phony. Largest, larger, you could not do larger 2 letters. Do not divide a word unless you can carry a syllable of at least 3 characters to the next line. And it's best not to make that 3rd character a punctuation mark. And if you look at the words that are illustrated here, deter, admit, you wouldn't divide those anyway because they're 5 or fewer letters. Set up, you have a comma, happily, a period. So none of those words should be divided. Do not divide abbreviations, numbers, contractions, acronyms, times, units of measure. See the examples here. None of those would be divided. You wouldn't want flight on one line and 12 on the other. You would not want to divide a contraction. Or pounds, you wouldn't put 7 and then 1/2 pound on the next line, or 7.5 and pound on the next line. Those should just not be divided. Try to divide compound words between elements, not within. Eyewitness, cross-reference. If you look to the right, you would not want to do eyewit and then nest on the second line, or cross hyphen ref and then hyphen in the rest of the word on the second line. Divide after the root word. Divide between two vowels when they are pronounced separately, but not when it's part of a single sound, such as patriotic. You hear the I and the O. Situated. So you would divide between those. But on treasure, the E and the A sound together. Jure. New, N-E-U, troll. So the EA, the EU are not pronounced separately, so you would not divide between them. You would divide after. But patriotic, you would divide between them, situated, because you hear both. You're going to love this one. Word division rule with vowels. Divide after a single letter vowel syllable, except when the single letter vowel syllable is followed by the ending BLE, BLY, CLE, or CAL. I did make these rules up. This is just how they came. For example, positive. All right, tiv is not one of those four, so you would divide after the I. Positive. Resonance. So you would divide after the O. But look at the last one. Logical. There you see one of those four endings. So whenever you have one of those four endings, you divide before the single letter vowel. Divide compound words between the words. In the examples you see here, self-control, tax-free, senator-elect, the only place you would divide those is at the hyphen. Avoid dividing proper names, titles, addresses, or dates. You really should not divide those at all. If you have to, in a situation where you just can't avoid it, such as a name, Carl T. Santos, you would divide after the middle name. First name, middle name, divide Santos. City and state, Green Bay, divide Wisconsin. San Diego, divide California. But you really should try to avoid that at all costs. Dates, April 15th, you can put 216 on the next line. Not recommended, but you can. And if you have a city name that is more than one word, you can separate between them. But like I say, this is an emergency situation. Avoid dividing these if you can. But if you see this on a test or that, here are the rules that you would apply. This is easy enough. You should not divide more than 2 lines in a row. As you see here, they're showing 3, and that is not recommended. No more than 2 in a row. In this one, it shows the last complete line of a paragraph. Do not divide a word on the last complete line of a paragraph. This one's easy enough to remember. You never divide a word at the end of a page. I'm a reader. I read lots of books, and I can't tell you how many books I have seen where there's a word been divided at the end of a page. And sometimes you even have to flip to the next page to see what the rest of the word is. It is not recommended to divide on the last complete line of a page. Do not divide between certain types of word groups. This is similar to the one with the acronyms and the contractions. Pages, dates, a title with the last name, and here again it shows you a time, and it shows dates and miles. Those should stay together. When you have an enumerated list, divide before, if you have to, not after an introductory number or letter. Example, in the first part it shows these points colon, and then you go to the next line for the 1. Not these points colon 1, and then the information that follows 1 on the next line. As shown to the left, step 1, the information should be there with it. Step 2, step 3. Always go after the enumeration or letter, not before. Divide after a dash, not before it. Early next year, dash, say in March. Not early next year and then the dash on the next line. It should always be at the end of the line. This completes a review of the word division rules. Again, begin by checking your hard copy dictionary, your software built-in dictionary, dictionary.com, to break the word into syllables, and then go to the Gregg Reference Manual, or you can do other sites online for following the basic rules of word division, of which there aren't many. And I guess I would end with this. Do not divide unless you have to. Adjust widths of columns if you're doing a newsletter a bit so you can avoid some of that. You might want to take the word to the next line. So if you have to divide, follow these rules. Otherwise, keep them together. Hope this helps you.